because this afternoon is part of a bigger celebration that's called Green Hills Homecoming. And I know a lot of people in this room didn't grow up in Green Hills, and some of the people in this room did grow up in Green Hills. But in the book, there are 2 poems, and that's what we're going to open with, placed in Green Hills. If you just imagine sliding the roof back and the floor raises you to where you're on the roof of the building, come on, then look that way, and the way I'm pointing, which is slightly northwest, and you would see Calvary Methodist Church. If you live in Green Hills, you know where that is. It's the top of the hill, right above the mall. And then if you look that way, you would see Shaw's Hill way across the valley. And it's where Harding Road comes into Hillsborough Road. And these poems are placed in those 2 places. But they're not placed during the war, they're placed after the war. The poet of one of them is supposed to come. I'm going on and read her poem. Yeah, I was going to read it for her anyway. She couldn't read it herself. But if she comes, I'll make a big deal over it. Battlefield, 1937. One hot summer day, a boy with little sister tagging behind climbs to a low crest where 3 weathered trenches sink in reedy waves, long lines of buckbush and prickly pears. The boy brings friends. Enthralled, they play at war. Unprepared for cactus, little sister in sunsuit sandals follows their violent charge through real war's land. Her sandaled feet are soon dotted with tiny spears. Little sister weeps to home, where mother with shiny tweezers becomes a battle surgeon, claiming pain must follow wounds. The child sobs, and in her baby way, learns that real danger dwells in battlefields forever. And the boy in that story was named Ken Goodpasture, and probably, some of you may know Joe Deal. He would have been one of the other boys in the group. If any of you know him, he's lived in Nashville a long time. And this one is by Jane Wilkerson Yount, and most Nashville people recognize the name Wilkerson because it's Bill Wilkerson. This poem is about Bill Wilkerson, for whom the Speech and Hearing Center is named. And it's been in here, it's been in Nashville a long time. And this is the one that takes place, she says Shaw's Hill. A lad studied, walked the Shaw's Hill woods, seeking to learn about that war, found trenches where the desperate fought, dug many balls that bodies tore. He climbed the hills, rough, steep, fell on rocks where blood had been, knew cold rain, this worn-out boy felt helpless misery of those men. In 3 years, pulled to later war, in diary penned, understanding this, in quotation marks, never has peace been appreciated enough. So to the battle that was his. And then the note, I have to cry when I read the note. So, note, Jane is the sister of Bill Wilkerson, killed at 19 years old in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge. The Bill Wilkerson Hearing Center of Nashville was named after him. And here's his picture that's of the portrait in Bill Wilkerson Center. And so we were really, and we have one other, I'm not going to read it because it's, but it's one other younger sister was able to write about her brother who had been killed in World War II in the book in relationship to, because the book's purpose was the effect of the Civil War. And I got more battlefield stories than I really expected. The war's going on. This is the story. But the point is the effect of the war. And if you think about the many different kinds of effect it had, I often wonder how you paid your taxes the first year after that war with all that Confederate money. My grandmother said she threw away a full barrel of it that was in the attic. And, you know, by the time I come along, we think it's a collector's piece. Worthless stuff. So now we have 3 men, and I have a watch, and I've taken a lot of time. But each of them gets 10 minutes. George Spain, we're going right down the line. George Spain is a Nashville native. He grew up not quite inside of this building, but he could have hiked over. And when he writes in his fiction, I can recognize some of the people when he writes about his boyhood. But he also writes this amazing prose, short stories, quite a number. He has 10 minutes. Go for it, George.
This first story, The Searcher, is also in a publication of mine that just recently came out of short stories titled Our People, Stories of the South. The title of this story is The Searcher. I'm going to read excerpts. On December 15th and 16th, 1864, the Confederate Army of Tennessee is destroyed 4 miles south of Nashville. Over 5,000 Federal and Confederate soldiers are casualties. 2 of every 5 men in the 13th United States Colored Troops Regiment are killed or wounded attacking Peach Orchard Hill at the Battle of Nashville. It is nearing late afternoon of the second day after the Confederates have retreated southward. The shell-torn hills and fields are covered with debris. Bodies and parts of bodies are still being found and buried. It stinks with a moldy odor. The Confederate dead in their shallow graves, buried where they have fallen, parts of men and horses scattered in the mud and litter, the blood of the wounded, the dead, and the sick filling the hospitals, churches, homes, and schools, the stench of the unwashed bodies of thousands of prisoners packed into abandoned buildings and warehouses, the burning of dead horses and the wreckage of battle, the piles of rubbish, the piss, the shit and decay of all the living and the dead. It is the odor of war rising from a city of 30,000, now filled with 70,000 Yankee soldiers and thousands of rebel prisoners and hordes of refugees, freed slaves, laborers, teamsters, gamblers, drummers, prostitutes, and herds of cattle and horses and mules. Wood smoke rises from campfires in and around the city. Coal smoke pours from the chimneys of factories and homes, trains and riverboats. Wagons, gunboats, and steamboats come and go continuously, some bringing fresh troops, ammunition, and supplies, others heading north, filled with the wounded and prisoners. It is bitter cold. At times, snow and sleet mingle with rain. Fires burn night and day as the smoke drifts high above the city, spreading a dark smudge across the sky, a cloud that can be seen and smelled from miles away. Where the battle has raged, trees are torn apart, limbs strewn upon the ground, stone walls crumbled. The muddy earth is plowed by cannonballs, grape shot, and canister, and rutted by wheels and galloping horses and the boot prints of running men who had done everything they could to kill one another. Within the city, the air is filled with the crunching of wagon wheels and the clopping of horse and mule hoofs on the unpaved streets, the high-pitched whistles of steamboats and gunboats on the Cumberland, the chugging and clanging of trains, the ringing of church bells, the sounds of music from the theaters, and of soldiers singing and officers shouting orders, of teamsters and drovers cursing animals, and of campfires hissing as the freezing rain continues to fall steadily all across the fields and hills of Middle Tennessee. A tall woman, thin almost to gauntness, stands ankle-deep in the muddy remnants of a cornfield that lies below a high gray hill. Her head and shoulders are slumped from exhaustion. She is so tired she can barely lift her feet, but her mind does not stop thinking. From a distance, she seems small. Her long red hair cannot be seen for the green woolen shawl that covers her head and shoulders. She was beautiful once, but now her face is so sunken and withered she appears old and without life. She wears 3 long dresses, a ragged blue army coat, high top button boots, and gloves that have no fingers. In the cold air, her breath makes little white clouds. She is searching for the body of the father of her baby. His name is Joseph Fan. He is a Negro soldier. She looks up at the hill. Ah, here it is, where they said to come to, where he was, the place he didn't come back from, right here where I stand. He fought here, in this very field, and up there on that hill. Oh, Joseph, me precious, where are ye? Ye said nay to worry, ye'd be back, but ye did nay. Night is almost come. The air grows colder. The crows are cawing to one another as they depart for their roost. The gawkers and scavengers are departing with the crows. From the pike a mule brays. A man shouts, "Get up!" and a wagon rattles as it begins its way back to town. As the light fades, she can hardly lift her feet for the mud and exhaustion. She is standing on the lower slope of the hill where Joseph and the 13th fought. Soldiers are there searching for wounded, and the grave diggers are there burying the dead. She hears someone shout, "Here's one alive!" Then a moment later, "Stretcher, stretcher." She stops near 3 men digging a grave. 2 are leaning on their shovels, while the 3rd man, whose face is dappled with white blotches, stands almost knee-deep in the ground, swinging a pick with a smooth, steady motion. Beside the grave lies a small, barefooted body dressed in a tattered butternut jacket and pants, with the face of a boy. His mouth is slightly open as though he is grinning. His eyes are closed. A jagged hole is in his forehead. His hands and feet are crossed. The men leaning on their shovels look at her as the pick swinger continues to dig. "Can you tell me where the men of the 13th Regiment be buried?" The man in the grave stops digging and wipes his brow with his sleeve. He looks up at her and points beyond the boy's head. "Missus, you sees where I was pointing. It's over there. We buried some of 'em yesterday and the rest this morning. They was lying all over the side of this hill all the way up to the top. We put 'em in 4 big, low, long ditches over there, and when we finished, we put up a board and got one of the soldiers that could make words to write on it, U.S. Colored Troops. Let me get out of this old hole and I'll lead you to it." He climbs out of the grave and tells the 2 men, "Y'all have this boy on the ground and get him covered over real good by the time I be back." Then he tells her, "Now you follow me close, missus." He leads her a little way across the slope to 4 long, muddy mounds of earth and waves his hand palm down as though giving a blessing. "Here they be." His voice is almost a whisper. He stands there watching her as she walks slowly past him and along each of the long graves, pausing now and then, looking down, her lips moving without a sound as she moves on. At the far end of the 3rd mound, she bends down and pulls out a half-buried dark blue cap. She wipes the mud off, holds it up near her face, turns it slowly as she examines it. She shakes her head and walks on, carrying the cap in her left hand at her side. The board with the inscription is stuck into the ground above the 4th grave. She stops there and reaches out with her right hand and touches the board. Then with her forefinger she traces each of the letters. After the last S, she turns to the man and says, "Thank ye," and walks away toward the pike. The mist is spreading over the field and up the slope of the hill like a white pall, slowly covering the dead and those who continue to put them in the ground. Behind her from the top of the hill, just above the breastwork, she hears men talking and laughing. "That poor old cracker won't use that little old peck of his anymore." Another asks, "Did y'all get everything out of his pockets?" And a third one says, "Just throw some dirt on him and let's get on back, 'cause damn, it's getting cold and I'm hungry." There's a dull sound of dirt falling onto the body of another man dressed in butternut, who had died on the hill 2 days before. As she walks through the cold dark, she thinks, Oh, me precious Joseph, 'tis an awful place for ye to die and be buried. My heart's breaking for ye. I love you so much. And for an instant, she feels such a sadness that she almost begins to cry. But she doesn't. Instead, she shakes her head and walks faster and lets the cap slip from her hand to the ground. When she reaches the pike, she falls in behind a wagon, close enough to hold on to the back to help support her on the long walk back to town. In the bare bit of light that remains, she sees a white soldier lying in the wagon's bed. His eyes are closed. He doesn't moan or wake when he is jostled hard by the wagon's wheels dropping into the deep ruts. The stillness on his face never changes. When the wagon comes to the outskirts of the city, Catherine turns away and goes on alone to Black Bottom and to her baby.
Now what I want to do is give a tiny space of time after each reader to say if you have any immediate quick questions, and then at the end of the whole thing we'll have another question time that you thought up questions on. But if anybody has any immediate question for George, raise your hand. You can ask it. You overwhelmed them, George. I can't think. Oh, okay, there are two. Okay.
How much did you take from resources? I mean, very, very, very graphic, very almost specific. A great deal. It's wonderful. Well, thank you. Research almost everything I write, even to the weather on a particular day, what smells are like, but I did a great deal on this. Another part in the story where she goes to the hospital, and one of the questions I had was whether I felt like that black troops, when they were wounded, were probably not placed in the white hospital, but I had nothing definite. James Lee McDonough, who is a friend of mine and wrote a book on the Battle of Nashville and Franklin, I called him. He's writing a book on Sherman right now, and he lives down in Lewisburg. And I asked him, I said, James Lee, did they have a separate hospital? And there was a long pause. And he said, well, dadgummit, I think they didn't mix them, but I'm not positive. And Paul Clement found me a photograph at the archives of the Black Hospital, which was down near Cumberland River. And in another part of the story, I described that hospital and the floors that she searches for him through it. So I do a great deal. Yeah.
And you had a question?
Yes, the question is the location. And I was trying to figure out exactly when you started, exactly where does this
Peach Orchard Hill is, if you go out Franklin Road and you approach Harding, where Franklin Road crosses Harding Road, and if you turn left right there, you would go right through Peach Orchard Hill. It's a cut that leads over to I-65, and that's Peach Orchard Hill right there. There's a marker there on Franklin Road, and I think another marker around on the side. I climbed that hill. I got permission from a neighbor who owns the place and went up to the top one afternoon.
And if you go down Franklin Road,
yes,
and then take a left on Harding,
yes,
it's immediate,
which is going up over the hill to 65.
Yeah, you go
left, right. On the right is, I think, you've got Overton High School and you've got Franklin Road Academy, everything. So you're talking about that hill?
Yeah, it's right there, right at the red light there, and when you turn left, right off Franklin Road onto Harding, you'll go right through Peach Orchard Hill.
Yeah. It's changed its nature from the time it was a peach orchard.
In fact, there's a housing place, main Peach Orchard, right over the hill, right as you get to 65.
Okay, we're running a little late. We're just going to run a little late. Everybody gets 10 minutes if they want it. The next three, all three of them are poets. This is James Floyd. James Floyd has been a poet in Nashville for several decades. He started in young, I think, and about just crawl over somebody. Go ahead. And I've known him off and on for some time. The Beat League Poets, if any of you remember, the Beat League Poets had a 30-minute poetry program on television on the Tennessee Channel back when they were here. It was quite remarkable. And they the ones that named you the Jefferson Street Poet? They named him the Jefferson Street Poet. And they had a little newspaper, and they had the television program, and they were quite helpful in the Nashville poetry scene, especially outside academia. Would you guess that? And so James is a very famous poet outside the academic world. But I have heard his poetry read, at least a little of it, on Nashville Public NPR. I was driving in the car, and they said, by James Floyd. And I says to my husband, hey. And then he was at Scarrick last year on that Poets Corner that they have there every fourth Thursday, I think. It's a wonderful program they have there, that they bring in poets from academia and poets from other sources. And so he's going to read his poem from the book. I also asked him to bring another poem that some of us here have heard before that we really like. It's all yours, James.
Okay, should I do Poets Are Crazy first? Or
no, do the poem from the book first.
Okay. This poem is titled The Darker Brother, and it gets its title from the poem by Langston Hughes, I Too Sing America. It's the first line of that poem. The Darker Brother. I am the darker brother. I have been kidnapped, accused, hunted down, beaten, toyed with, experimented on, and sold. I've been lied to, lied on, laughed at, disenfranchised, drugged, labeled, and lynched. My home has been burned, my churches bombed, my woman raped, my children murdered, and I have been called uncivilized. I have labored from sunup to sundown in other people's fields, and they have cashed my sweat for money. I have discovered, invented, created. They have cashed my brains for money. I have styled, designed, written. They have cashed my talents for money. I have fought and died in their civil war, and they have cashed my blood for victory and glory. Who else could have survived, thrived, kept the dream alive, and still, even now, be reaching for the sky? I am the darker brother. Now, if you want to see a dramatization of this poem, go to YouTube and type in The Darker Brother. We use 35 millimeter stills. Some of you all might remember Asheed Hemon from African Dreamland. He scored it. So there's the drama, the visible drama, and the music to it. It's on YouTube by that title. Okay, I'll do.
Okay.
I'll do Poets.
This is one I requested.
Okay, and if there's time, I'll do one more.
Yeah.
Okay. Poets are crazy. They attempt to reach past the thin veil of this reality and touch with their pencils that core of beauty, which is the essence of everything. They always fail, yet they try again and again, like a moth in its efforts to reach the flame. Upon an ocean of facts, amid waves of impossibilities, they float, imprisoned inside transparent bubbles of dreams. And it's so hard for poets to make it among sane people because they're always worrying while everyone else is satisfied, always frightened while others feel secure. And the only scars they have to show for the wounds that caused them so much pain are their poems. Poets are always laughing while others crying. The crying is others laughing. Each poem that causes them to die is a breath of life. Each breath of life kills them. Poets know no language they can call upon to make what they feel understood, but people call them great and immortalize them for their inability to communicate. All poets are crazy, because they know that as a result of any fame or success they achieve in this world, they probably fail to accomplish anything. And every time someone says to them, "I understood that poem," they say to themselves, "How could you have understood that poem? It wasn't written for you to understand it, but yourself. Then you would know how much I love you, though we've never met before this, and that would cause you to cry for me as I bleed for you. For only in a mixture of my blood and your tears will there ever be found understanding." So that makes poets crazy people who step on broken glass to keep from walking on the flowers in their efforts to find something that will empty them as it fills them. Across the street from Borders on West End, in Centennial Park, there's a war monument with the list of a lot of people who died during a battle. I have a solo exhibit at Scarlett Bennett College this fall in September. No exact date set, but I'll have between 17 and 20 photographs in that exhibit. And a picture of this monument is in one of those exhibits. And I will have a poem to accompany each photograph. Now, I'll preface the poem I'm going to say. Carl Jung said that we fight for a lot of reasons we give ourselves, but it very well could be instinctual, our tendency to make war, because we've been doing it ever since we've been here. And anytime somebody protests against a war, the spin is put on it as though you are protesting against the soldiers, you know. You're protesting against the killing of each other. And so this poem is titled Borders. Hell hates humility. Heaven will remember the selfish prayers and pious daydreams of elders who tithe and hurrah reckless youth off to war. Then pine their patriotic graves, whose tombstones stand as stubby monuments to the implacable delusion of a fabricated world held together with cliches, paradox, slogans, and imaginary lines that define and divide as they move across his face like so many unholy worms, blazing insidious trails that lead to no conclusion but beg the question, if this poem makes no sense, maybe it's because nothing does. Thank you.
Very good.
Anybody
Thank
want
you.
to ask a question? It's a little different from research. It's insight we're talking about. I'm going to take this break in the middle of them to say the people with little white dots on their collars, and a few that don't have them yet, are also authors in this book. So if you're sitting next to a person with a little white dot, or in front or behind one, they also have work in this book. I just did that to identify them. And one came in just now. I've got to walk over and give her a white dot. The next reader is Randy Foster, and I didn't know I had put two photographers in this group. Randy is a photographer, a poet. He has some friends who are photographers, and they have done a show of all photography and poetry. What was that called, Randy?
Civil Conundrum.
Civil Conundrum. It was about the Civil War. I learned about it the day after the show had happened, and then they contacted me. And all three of those photographers have work in this book. Randy has also been a Nashville councilman and knows how the city runs. I don't
But
think
I
you
won't.
want now, though.
I won't say anything right now about how it runs. I promise.
And don't ask me
Just
questions
fine,
about how the
just
city
fine.
runs. That's not in the question. Ask you questions about photography and poetry. That's the subject today. Take it. Go for it, Randy.
Okay. Civil Conundrum was an interesting project. It was based on photographs that were taken by Robert McCurley, a friend of mine from work. He, besides being an insurance executive, is a really great art photographer. And he asked another friend of mine at work, Amy E. Hall, and me to write some poems to go with these photos he had taken. They were photos of Civil War reenactors that he had taken down at the Carnton Plantation. And what Robert was wanting to explore with his photos and have us comment about is this notion of, why do we seem to love the Civil War so much? What is it, for many of us about the lost cause that is such a noble thing? And, his history, I don't think he's a Southerner, so he comes at it from a different point of view. Being a Nashvilleian, I see it a little bit differently. And because of Amy's influence, I actually saw it quite differently because I thought about it from a woman's perspective. One of the photos, and it's actually one of the photos on the front of the book, is of a woman standing there holding her head, holding her bonnet on as the wind is blowing. And it inspired me to write the poem Rumors. What news of battle comes on the wind? What word of war to buffet like March gusts? It seems so long ago you marched away, so fair and handsome under the regiment's homemade banner, to the shrill tune of a fife and the beat of an old drum carried by a child, a boy younger than our son. I've heard rumors of our Army's victories and heard rumor of its far, far too many defeats. But I have heard no rumor of you, not the smallest fleeting rumor of you. I watch for you, scanning the horizon for the first glimpse of your dear sweet face, but all that comes is the biting winter wind to chap my lips and mock my hopes as my checked gingham dress flaps on the breeze like a flag of surrender. Another photo, actually on again on the front of the book, is an excerpt of a photo I took down at the Shiloh National Battlefield. It's from the Confederate monument. It's a big monument, lots of different figures on it. It's well worth the trip to see, and I would encourage everybody, take advantage of these battlefields that are close by. Within a couple of hours' drive, you can walk through history and no longer just drive past it. But this photo, it's just two Southern soldiers. I imagine one of them to be a bit younger than the other and of lower rank, and the whole monument really speaks to defeat. When you see the Southern women gathered together on the monument, it's truly heartbreaking because it is such a sad depiction of the state of thought. So I wrote a piece from the perspective of this man who just wants to go home. It's called Defeat. I'm just so very, very tired and only want to go home, if in fact I've any home remaining. I don't remember anymore what it was I was ever fighting for beyond my own doubtful survival. And I would be ever so happy, sir, to lay down my arms and leave if you'd only just let me go. In the early days, it was all a game with marching bands and speeches and pretty girls exhorting us to fulfill the obligation of our nobility, calling us to serve our people and our glorious heritage. No doubt General Washington, our model Cincinnatus, would have been proud of us as we volunteered to defend hearths, homes, and our sacred and most peculiar institution. Early on, Cold or hot, ready or not, we seemed blessed by the Almighty to find victory on the battlefield more often, I think, due not to any impressive military prowess, but to the commanding stupidity and hauteur of our enemy's parade ground generals, who at the final opportunity and push couldn't stand the sight of blood. The romance of a summer's war soon lost its luster as years passed, and the awful casualties mounted, the dead in their graves and the maimed by the roadsides, to remind me that I was hale and hearty and still had a life that I could lay down for my infant country. My hope, often sickly and forlorn, began to die in the wilderness, when the boys in blue began to stand and fight and trade their lives for ours, gaining victory in the horrible exchange as we lurched for a handful of months from skirmish to battle to siege and to inevitable defeat. Once broken to rise no more, hope's tattered and insubstantial ghost passed like a fading dream as the general, bowing his old gray head, notwithstanding the Yankees' temporary magnanimity, signed his famous name to our unconditional surrender while the ashes of Richmond smoldered. So there'll be no victory parade, no boisterous cavalcade when I arrive back home. If God grants me the grace, I'll daily stare into the southbound end of a sullen northbound mule to get some little crop into the ground just in time for a late harvest, just before the killing frosts. With ghosts of gray and blue to keep me company, I'll toil to scratch out of my meager little homestead a hardscrabble living, little different from what I'd earned before, but now bereft of honor, worthy of a defeated man. Thank you.
You know, you may want to ask how somebody becomes a poet like that. It just they have several photographs in the book, and the other poets are also amazing. Robert McCurley wrote one called "Concluding Remarks." It's Lincoln sitting there waiting to give the Gettysburg Address. It's an amazing poem. They're all three of them are just wonderful people. I hope I know the next time you give a show.
Okay, will do.
And finally, we have Alan Rhodey. He is, as you can tell, he is a musician because all those music instruments on the other side. He gave 2 poems and 1 song to this book. And he is not the person whose actual music appears in the book. That was somebody else who's now moved to the Southwest. It's amazing how quickly the world disperses sometimes. But he wrote the song a long time ago, and it does have to do, he's going to tell the story. It's a good story, and he didn't tell it to me before the book launch, so I didn't get to put it in the book. And anything else you want to read or sing or say? Alan.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sally. It's great to be part of this today. I started attempting to write poetry when I was in my teens because of my wife, who I was dating at the time, I guess. And then when I was in the military later, I wrote a few poems while I was in the service out of mainly loneliness and missing my family and my opposition to the Vietnam War at the time. And I was playing guitar and just learning music at that time as well. But along the way, I guess there's some debate on this, but after 40 years of writing and playing music and writing poetry, not a whole lot of poetry, but a whole lot of songs, and reading and admiring other people's work in both genres, I think poetry and songwriting are very linked, and in many cases they've gone hand in hand. As most of you know, certain poems have been put to music by musicians and singers and turned into wonderful songs. And some song lyrics I think, can be read in the sense of a poem. But in a lot of cases, that's not true. That's not true at all. I was saying some poems have been put to music very successfully, and some song lyrics can be read as poetry. But I think those are special lyrics, really, because when you start putting yourself in the parameters of writing music, you're immediately limiting yourself, for lack of a better word, to free verse, and there's also a major simplicity element that goes into songwriting that's not necessarily there in prose and poetry. So I just love writing anything, really. I have hopes of writing prose in the future. But I wanted to read this one poem today before I perform this song that Sally asked me to.
Read it loud.
Once I, sorry, hello. Once I found out about this book by way of my wife, who takes Pilates with Sally, I was inspired, actually, to try and compose a poem that would be hopefully fitting for it. And this is what I came up with. It's called Aftermath. O heart's blood, purged forevermore, in the name of industry and opposing beliefs. O heart's blood, drained from the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young lives and life's promises. What sacrifice can be worth so much that so many are gone from this earth forever? Death and freedom, death and freedom, death and freedom. We live our normal lives now in the after years. Some have been raised to do battle in other ways, of mind and the spirit, in the hopes of no more hatred, and others, the perpetuation of it. Are we not able to move on? Are we not able to coexist in respect to one another as humans? Humans, death, and freedom. Humans, death, and freedom. The song that I'm going to play came about from a book we have at home. I met my wife in art college, and I'm still a painter as well as trying to write stuff. But we have this wonderful book at home called The Art of the Old West, and it's connected to this. The song is connected to this book in a bit of a roundabout way. There's a wonderful painting by Frederick Remington, I believe it is, of a Pony Express rider changing horses at a station. And there's a quote in the text and under the painting, and it was taken from the San Francisco paper just before the Civil War broke out, and the Pony Express service was still in existence. And to my amazement, the Pony Express was only in existence for about 7 months until the telegraph came along, I guess. But I'm going to get my guitar here. The quote was actually an ad for the Pony Express service at the time. And it read, wanted young wiry fellows must be under the age of 18, expert riders willing to risk death daily. $25 a week, which was a lot of money back then. $25 a week, orphans preferred. So it's quite a job opportunity in these days. And that inspired me to try and put myself in the position of one of these writers, which is nearly impossible to do. But anyway, this is a song of mine called Pony Rider. My mouth is cracked and dry. Ain't seen trouble since late last night. The saddlebags are tight and full. My horse pulling like a big old bull. Ration your water, ration your water. 10 miles to the next station. Hang on. I'm a pony rider. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. I'm a pony rider. Lord knows how I got here. There's a letter in here from Mr. Lincoln. There's a letter in here from Mr. Lincoln. Fort Sumter's under fire. Sure as hell is gonna be a war. Ration your water, ration your water. 6 miles to the next station. Hang on. I'm a pony rider. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. Oh no. I'm a pony rider. Lord knows how I got here. But now I'm out here. I awake in a cold sweat. I awake from the same nightmare. There's 16, 25 bucks a week. Days are gone, but I'm still having bad dreams. It was ration your water, ration your water, ration your water. Hang on. I was a pony rider, rode under the Union flag. After that, I was a pony rider. All I can say is thank God for the telegraph. It was ration your water, ration your water, ration your water. Hang on. think we should have applauded after each of these guys read. I was getting ready to.
Was in Franklin there's a poetry group that meets once a month, and the part of its culture is that after these fantastic poems, each person reads one. Sometimes you get to read a second one. There's dead silence, just dead silence, and sometimes we go. And we smile at each other across it. But that's poetry have that effect, and songs have the effect of clap, noise, lots of good noise. If anyone wants to know from an editorial point of view how Pony Rider got into the poem, he mentions a letter from Mr. Lincoln, and he mentions he wrote for the Union. He has two little references in there, I just loved it. And the editor liked horses. You didn't say that. Now, all of these gentlemen are Nashvillians, and so Nashville should be pretty proud. I know there's lots of talent in Nashville. This shows up a variety of the talent that Nashville has to offer. And I chose them because they were Nashvillians. This is a Nashville library, and so we tried to do that. If we were in Franklin, it'd be a different bunch. If we were in... we had one writer from Chattanooga, one from Colorado, a man from Illinois. It was interesting what came to this book. It was much more than I expected, really. It was a great good fortune to have this book. Now, if anyone's thought of any more questions they'd like to ask, this is your chance. Any questions? Yeah.
I was interested in the first poem you read. How did they get prickly pear in Nashville?
Oh, we had little flat. We called them prickly pears. They were about the leaf to it was a little bit smaller than your hand, not much, and it had awful. And the plant grew kind of low, and it grew out like this. And that hill was covered with buckbush and prickly pears. And we called them prickly pears. And I think, and when I first wrote the poem, it was so long ago I couldn't remember the word prickly pear. And I put cacti, and I knew it was wrong. And so I began asking people, well, what was that name? Prickly pear. Oh, yeah, of course. And we don't even see them much anymore. But that hill was covered with buckbush and prickly pears, and they had those 3 trenches, at least 3. I can't say I ventured up there after that day, because that child was me. It was my cousin that led the. And they had on, those high lace sneakers that boys wore, and I didn't. I remember my mother saying, "Sit still, Sally." She's got that tweezers. It's quite a day. Stayed with me. Now, and do you want to ask any other things? Anybody? Somebody, yeah.
I was going to ask Alan if the song that you just sang had been cut on a record on label.
No, I've always wanted Willie Nelson or...
I think Willie Nelson...
Or the
could do
Nitty
that
Gritty
very
Dirt
well.
Band.
Have you pitched it to him?
I have,
Okay.
but I don't know if he ever heard it. But I have recorded it. I've made 7 albums, CDs, cassettes, vinyl, and 2 compilation CDs that I've released independently. And it's on one of my CDs. Yeah. Or rather, excuse me, I'm the only one that's recorded it. I'm not sure it's on one of those CDs, but it needs to be on a future one.
It needs to be.
It's a great song.
It is.
Anybody else?
Are they on iTunes?
Have you taken any of your stuff up to Bluegrass Underground in Kentucky? Sounds like it.
You mean the band or the show?
I'm sorry?
You mean the TV show or there's a group called Bluegrass Underground?
Well, it's on Channel 8.
Yeah. Yes.
Gorgeous music.
Yeah, we watched that show.
And I think...
I recognize your voice. Never have seen her before, but I recognize her voice. She is also a professional musician.
Very good. Very good.
So,
I think you have something to offer that. Have you watched it?
I have. We watch it regularly, and
Well,
this
I was real taken, and I'm not particularly fond of bluegrass music.
right.
But that was like an opera. It was just something I'd never heard before. And I think your music fits that mold.
Thank you. The same people that produce Bluegrass Underground also produce a radio show. Some of you may have heard on moved around to different stations, but it's called Music City Roots, and they also do the Bluegrass Underground. What's the name of the particular cavern? Does anyone know where that's held? It's in Tennessee, yeah. No, it's not Mammoth Cave. It's a cave in Tennessee, I believe. Cumberland Caverns. That's it, yeah. But I have submitted to those people who make both of those shows, and it's like anything else. You just have to keep being politely persistent. But thank you.
now, we have one more surprise. It's a surprise. And it's a surprise to both of us. I mean, I knew she was coming,
But I got lost.
but she got lost. So we're really, really lucky that
Where I came from, I was supposed to go north. And instead, I went south. The directions were south, but all confused.
Anyway, some people wrote poetry for the book. Now, let me before you sing, I want you to be the last event.
Okay.
So, give her a time. I want to introduce a few more poets and people who are in the room. I'm going to begin down here, and I'll probably skip somebody. I apologize if I skip you, but this is stand up. This is Vera. Pronounce your name.
Vera Rajaratnam.
Okay. I've known her for a number of years. I still can't say it. And her poetry book will come out soon. Not sure exactly when. Maybe August, September. She's exhibited at Centennial, and is also a photographer. And she is from Sri Lanka. She grew up in Sri Lanka, came to the States to college. She wrote poems that apply to this book. It is just amazing what people could do for this. Now, let's see, that's you. John Davis back there has a novel out that's the most wonderful book called The Sixth William. I can't pronounce it. It's 6th. I can't pronounce it. It's a fantastic novel. I recommend it to everybody. Behind him is, I'm going totally blank. Gail Haddard. She's one of the people mentioned on the blurb in the back of the book, and the person I got to write the blurb had never met any of them. It was very interesting what she chose. Gail is also an artist. She has even has a permanent exhibit now where she sells things. Wow. And she lives in Williamson County now. And Marshall County. Okay. Even further away. Let's see, go down, who am I missing? Bill Peach is one of the great philosophers of Franklin. And he has an essay in the book that was beautifully edited by Claire over there, he has on a dark blue sitting there in the middle of the group. The next is Dave Stewart. He has one of the funniest stories you ever read in your life in this book called something about reenactment. I've forgotten what it's called, but you just roll in the floor when you read it. Now, next to him is Nancy Allen. She has a story about a quilt, and like many stories in this book, it's true. And I made all these people change the names of the characters, make it fiction, so they did. I didn't do that to Bill, but I did. Now, behind her is Charlene Jones, who I have only met this moment. We've talked on the phone a number of times. She is a Nashvilleian. She is a professional musician and songwriter mostly in it now. You did perform, but now she spends her time writing. And I don't know any of her songs, but I've read her novel. And on the back of the novel, the blurb says, "Nobody shows you country the national scene like this." And let's see who's down here. There's Ben. He is an archaeologist for the state. And not only did he write a poem and take pictures, his 14-year-old daughter was the official photographer of the book. And so most of the work in the book, well, not most, but a lot of it is. Now this Claire, who I've already mentioned, was an editor, and her mother is Louise Collin, who is one of the great writers of Franklin, Tennessee. But she's not from Franklin. She's from Missouri, but she's still one of the great writers. And been here a while, though. A while. And then there's Judith Walter, who has a poem, not a poem, a story in the book. And she wrote a good story. I didn't know whether to put it in ghost stories. Sometimes you were stuck with that. Was it a ghost story? Was it not a ghost story? In fact, we have one ghost story in the book where the ghost says he doesn't know whether he's a ghost or not. That became very interesting. Now, to end, if anybody wants to ask a question, do it quick, because I'm going to have one more thing happen. Okay. Lydia Esmond is a poet. I'm not sure whether she lives in Williamson County or not. I've known her for a while. She wrote a poem. She handed it in as a poem. She had a poetry book come out. I went to the reading in the library, and just casually, as she read the poem, she said, "I also sing." And she's going to sing the poem that's in this book. And I sort of planned her for the very last event of the day.
We need to make sure that she's near a microphone.
Okay, come over the other side. This will be good.
I wrote this poem as a poem, and I never knew it would be a song. Is that on? Okay. But I had written other poem songs, poetry and the song at the same time. But my sister at one point said, "Lydia, why don't you write, I never took music theory, but I just wrote all these songs." She says, "Why don't you write an Oriental song?" So right away I thought, pentatonic scale. So one day I was just fiddling around with a melody I had in my mind for a very different scenario. And then I looked at my poem. I says, darn, if those words don't fit that pentatonic song melody. So here it is. Lilacs in the Rain. Lilacs in the rain through my window pane, reminding me he's far away and calling hymns in vain. In the breeze they blow gently to and fro, but they cannot wipe away the tears that freely flow. Memories of love long past, like phantoms in the night, seize my mind and hold it fast until the morning light. Lilacs in the rain, mirror of my pain, telling me he's gone away and won't return again. In life's springtime you were there, your blossom sweet and fair, inspired my heart to you confide its every woe and care. Lilacs in the rain, theme of my refrain, though my love has passed away, with me you shall remain. And the lilac is a very Victorian flower, incidentally.
I mean, it's such a poem that could have been written in the 1880s. It's pretty. That concludes today. You've been a really attentive audience. You were really nice. Many of the authors in this book had not heard each other's work read aloud. So it was a chance. Yes, Alan?
I'd just like to say, any of you authors who are here, I inadvertently sold the book that I had a whole lot of signatures in from the book launch day. So I'm starting over again. But if you are an author, please sign my book for me. Thank you.